Howdy, my dudes. Patch notes are finally live. Let's check it out. I haven't read it. Let's go through it together. So first, obviously, table of contents. Don't care about that. Let's go from start to finish. Content update 2.0, Dawn of the Hunt League. Start fresh new economy with the Dawn of the Hunt League. All your old characters from the early access launch are still present, but a free passive tree refund has been granted due to the changes. We would highly recommend and encourage you to join the new league to fully take in the changes we've made with the 0.2.0 updates. There are standard, hardcore, and solo self-found variations of the Dawn of the Hunt League available. They have the same core mechanics and items as the existing early access league. So standard and the new league are the same. We knew that. For more information about the content update, check out pathofexile2.com/hunt. So that's what you do when you go to the front page and you see learn more. Now, content and features, added a new playable class, the Huntress. Added the new Amazon and Ritualist Ascendancy classes for the Huntress. Added the new Smith of Kitaba Ascendancy class for the Warrior. Added that Tactician for the Mercenary, Lich for the Witch. Added over 25 new skills, primarily the spear skills, and added over 100 new support skills, or support gems. Added 2 new item classes, spears and bucklers. That's pretty great. I had hoped maybe axes or swords might come in, but we got spears and bucklers. That makes sense. Added over 100 new unique items. Added 8 new endgame maps, each with new encounters and rewards. Good stuff. Introduced 4 unique strong boxes, special chests with unique encounters. Introduced 12 rogue exiles. Others like you who have been exiled and are openly hostile. Each one has their own skills, personalities, and are much smarter than the average monster and player, probably. Just kidding. These exiles use unique items that will drop if you successfully kill them. Introduced as Marian Wisps, spirits that can be found throughout both the campaign and the endgame. As you approach these wisps, they will flee, leading you past monsters. Any monsters that comes into contact with are influenced by the spirit, making them more powerful and the spirit more rewarding. Let them get away for too long and they'll dissipate and return to the woods. So they're basically the possessed spirits from Path of Exile 1. It's as we figured. Added 15 new socketable items with new modifiers that you can craft onto your items. These seem to be the talismans that they showed. That looks pretty cool. Plus the different variations of the runes. Introduce the Twilight Reliquary Key when consumed at the Reliquary Vault, a new area on the endgame map. It grants you access to a vault with a chest that drops a special foil version of unique items selected by your own supporters. They can contain any unique found in Path of Exile 2, though if the selected item is a pinnacle boss drop, they only drop special then only special keys dropped by the relevant content will be able to provide these items. The reliquary content has 453 options for foiled uniques that it can yield. And so the special thing about the foiled items is they got different art. They have like fancy purple and blue and whatnot alternating colors. It looks pretty nifty, but it's mostly just visible on the character screen, I'm pretty sure, not actually on your character. Essences can now have Vol Orbs applied to them to corrupt the essences within a range of unpredictable outcomes. Greater essences are possible to be upgraded to 4 new corrupted essences. Fantastic. This is just the ones in the maps, not actually in your inventory. Unless they change that, but I'm pretty sure it's just the ones in maps. Continue to incrementally improve the sound, art, effects, and environment. That sounds fantastic. Now, endgame changes. Areas of corruption on the Atlas now have a central corrupted nexus that is the source of the affliction. In the areas leading to the nexus, corruption will spill out from slain enemies and amalgamate into powerful monsters. Upon reaching the nexus, you'll begin the task of cleansing the source of corruption. Complete this task and receive crystalline shards that you can use to obtain Atlas passive skill points. Okay, so the Atlas tree gives you more skill points with this. That sounds fun. A boss of each faction has been added. These appear in the Corrupted Nexus. Additional corruption monsters factions have also been introduced. Cool. Corruption monsters have had their visuals and animation improved, and their skills have been rebalanced. Corruption areas no longer Oh, sorry. Corruption areas no longer implicitly have +1 to area level, but are now much more likely to have modifiers. And the modifiers can be more powerful. Some new corruption modifiers have also been added. Cleansing a nexus will cause surrounding maps to become cleansed maps, which have their own set of monsters and rewards, including the newly introduced Fracturing Orb. The Fracturing Orb fractures a random modifier excuse me, on a rare item with at least 4 mods, locking it in place. In order to open a corrupted Nexus map, the waystone placed in the map device will need to have at least 4 modifiers. Okay, nifty. Opening a corrupted Nexus, the waystone placed in the map device will need to have at least 4 modifiers. I'm not too sure what that means. It sounds a little confusing, but I'm probably just thinking about it too hard. You can now respawn a map, or respawn and return to a map if you die. Upon first entering the endgame, you get up to 6 total attempts per map. As you add more mods to a waystone, the number of respawns goes down. In parties, everyone gets to respawn that number of times, which means infinite going in and out of maps until you die too many times, which is phenomenal. You'll be able to enter and exit your maps as much as you like as long as you haven't died. The number of portals is representative of the number of revives you have during the map. Once you start a boss fight, the respawning system will change to require the map owner to collectively respawn the entire party, so that you must still kill the boss from full life. Okay. If you decide to rush the map boss without interacting with any of the other map content and then die, you'll respawn at the boss checkpoint and only the map boss will be present. All of the other monsters and content will be removed. This is to prevent cases where players would be able to farm multiple copies of the same rewards by dying on purpose. Okay, that's an interesting way to fix that. It's kind of fun. So don't suicide on the boss, obviously. The number of towers on the Atlas tree has been reduced drastically, but each one is now more powerful. Great, there's too many towers. Tablets, except for Overseer tablets, inherently add twice as many mechanics to towers. Using higher tier waystones and towers also now increases the number of mechanics applied by tablets. By tier 15, the bonus is doubled, allowing a single tablet to now add 4 times as many things as before. Right here's where we are. Come here, Uno. I know. You don't need to be on my toes. The tower maps can now spawn with all extra content mechanics, including bosses. Fantastic. The number of maps affected by tablets has been doubled on average, and also now scales based on map tier. Killing rare monsters required for map completion no longer has a chance to grant monster mods to the remaining rare monsters. Increase the chances for rare monsters to have 3 or 4 modifiers in maps. Note this means they drop more items. Ooh, fantastic. That's actually kind of surprising that they would make it drop more items. I thought they'd be toning that back, if anything. This is mostly to compensate for the removal of rare monsters, granting their modifiers to other rare monsters on death. Okay, I didn't even know that they were granting their mods to other rares. Interesting. A checkpoint now spawns when the last available optional content in a map has been completed. Okay, interesting. Extra content such as Breach, Delirium, Expedition, Ritual now start spawning further away from the Ziggurat Refuge. Okay, is that to avoid being overwhelmed early on? Who knows? How waystones are obtained in maps has been redesigned. Our intention is to make both sustaining waystone drops much more reliable and less dependent on random elements. Waystones can no longer drop at lower tier than the map that you are in. Waystones dropped by the final boss will now always be 1 tier higher than the map you are in. Final map bosses and the naturally occurring rare monsters in tier 1 maps have 100% chance to drop a waystone. This chance scales down as you get into higher tiers, but will still be granted with appropriate investment into waystone suffix mods, and through the Atlas passive tree. Natural waystone drops have been reduced to compensate. Okay. Remove chances for waystones to drop a tier higher from the Atlas passive tree, and lowered the amount of waystone quantity available on Atlas passive tree, so that will be replaced with something else. Curious to see what. Sources of map bosses have a chance to drop waystones of the current tier or higher, have been replaced by increased quantity of waystones dropped by map monsters. Doriani now has up to 10 waystones available to purchase, either at tier 1 or tier below your highest tier completed. Oh, weird. He wouldn't keep up with you. Overseer tablets now cause up to 2 to 4 maps in range to contain bosses, previously 3 to 7. The waystone chance granted by waystone suffix modifiers has been reduced as a result of the new chances to drop waystones. Unidentified waystones now provide 30% increased waystone drop chance instead of 30% increased quantity. The first 5 different unique maps you complete each now grant 2 Atlas passive skill points for a total of 10 extra points. The specialties of some maps has been adjusted to account for the addition of Asmarian wisps. Added new modifiers relating to Asmarian spirits for Overseer tablets. Added new modifiers relating to Asmarian spirits and rogue exiles for Precursor tablets. The Untainted Paradise now has 200 to 400% increased experience gain. Previously is 150 to 300%. Hopefully they'll also add a bunch more monsters because it still was really terrible for experience farming. A new crafting mechanic called Recombination has been added to the Expedition, which will make Expedition much better, which allows you to select mods on 2 items, hoping to get the best elements of each on a single item. As you select more mods, the chance of success decreases. If you are not successful, the items will be destroyed. This will be unlocked as you complete your first expedition and requires artifacts found during the expedition to fuel it. The tablet modifiers that cause ritual favors in your maps have 5 to 10% increased chance to be omens, now has values of 15 to 25%. Okay. The Overseer tablet modifiers that cause map bosses to have a 10 to 20% chance to drop a waystone of the current tier or higher now has values of 5 to 8%. So they're really dropping down waystones, but they're bringing up pretty much everything else. Hopefully they're making each individual waystone better, and it does sound like they are doing so. Precursor tablet suffixes that granted additional base chance for random extra content now instead grant increased chance. This affects existing items. Okay. The tablet modifiers that provides increased rarity of items found in your maps now has a value of 10 to 15%, previously 10 to 20%. The tablet modifier that provide increased quantity of items in your maps now has a value of 3 to 7%, previously 3 to 8. The tablet modifiers that provide increased pack size in your maps is now 3 to 7, previously 3 to 8. Tablet that provides gold increase is 10 to 15, previously 5 to 10. Okay, the tablet modifiers that give breach in your maps increase monster density now give 4 to 6% from 5 to 10, while the modifier that also gives breach open faster now has values of 3 to 5% from 8 to 12%. The tablet modifiers for rare monsters having an additional modifier can no longer roll. I actually like that one. The modifier in Simulacrum for rare monsters having an additional modifier also no longer appears. The various endgame quests that lead to the Arbiter of Ash encounter have been consolidated into a single quest. Okay, so no longer 3 tablets, just 1, I guess. All the bosses that are affected by difficulty in Simulacrum can now drop all of their specific unique items at any difficulty. However, rare uniques are even rarer at low difficulties. This applies to the drop chances for reliquary keys from this content. Pinnacle boss content now takes roughly half the amount of time to unlock compared to before. In addition, Pinnacle bosses have been made much easier at difficulty 0 as well. It is our intention to allow you to face difficulty 0 of this content much earlier in your endgame progression while still preserving the difficulty of difficulty 4. Players no longer lose experience from dying in Simulacrum, the Twisted Domain, Ulros Arena inside the logbooks, the Crux of Nothingness, or the Burning Monolith. Oh yeah, Twisted Domain is where Zesht is. Okay. Players also no longer gain experience from killing monsters in these areas. That means you will no longer be able to farm Breach for experience. Move the location of the stash in Simulacrum to make it harder to accidentally start the encounter when trying to open the stash, which is good. Reduce the power of notables in the League-specific Atlas passive trees for acquiring logbooks, breach splinters, Simulacrum splinters, and an audience with the king. Delirium encounters and maps now reward one Simulacrum splinter each time a reward type is filled. That does not seem like much. Simulacrum splinters can now be obtained through Delirium encounters in all map tiers, with the amount of scaling up per map tier. Okay, nice. The base number of monsters spawned in Delirium encounters has been reduced, and the numbers that emerge by touching fracturing mirrors has been greatly increased. Very nice. I wonder if the fracturing mirrors has something to do with the fracturing orbs. Like, is fracturing orbs a Delirium thing? I thought it was something different. Reduce the intensity of the fog in Delirium encounters. Beautiful. The number of monsters spawned from breaches has been reduced. Sad. A higher percentage of the total number of breach monsters spawned are now spawned earlier in that counter. Okay. Reduce the number of small breach chests found. Breach splinters can now be obtained from breaches in all map tiers, with the amount scaling up per map tier. This is really nice because if you went down to a certain map level, I think it was like 11, you just wouldn't get splinters or shards. It was rough. Breach and Delirium encounters are now considered completed when you open the Clasped Hand or Delirium Mirror. Strong boxes now spawn slightly more packs of monsters and maps. Omens now always appear as ritual rewards in map areas. There's also a small chance for an additional omen to appear. That is beautiful. Vendors in the Ziggurat Refuge and those in your hideout now correctly have level 65 items available, rather than one having level 60 items and the other having level 70. Strange. If you exit the game while in the endgame area map, logging back into the same character will now place you back inside the map instance if it still exists. Ooh, I like that. Atlas passive tree changes. Added support for the Asmarian spirits and rogue exiles in the Atlas passive tree. Added more notable passives. Reworked and some existing ones to make their available choices more interesting. The Deadly Evolution Atlas keystone has been replaced by a new keystone called Ecological Shift, which causes your maps to have 40% more change to contain random extra content and 20% less number of monster packs in your maps. I don't know how I feel about that one. It would have felt really great if it didn't have the 20% less monster packs. Just reading it sounds bad. Now, can now obtain 40 Atlas passive skill points from 30 before. The Crumbling Walls Atlas notable passive now has 10% chance for additional breach, previously 15%, 3% chance for 3 additional breaches, previously 5, and 1% for an additional 10 breaches, which was previously 2%, and that felt extremely rare as it was. The Extreme Archaeology notable passives no longer cause monsters to spawn with 20% of their life missing. The Frantic Invasion Atlas notable passive now has 50% increased quantity of breach splinters dropped by breach monsters in your maps, previously from 75%. The Grasping Hands Atlas notable passive now has 30% more clasped hands, previously from 50%, and clasped hands in your maps now have 20% chance to be guarded by a pack of magic monsters, previously 25%. The Interdimensional Assault Atlas notable passive now has breach in your maps. The Interdimensional Assault Atlas notable passive now has breaches in your maps have 10% increased monster density previously. That's a weird sentence to read. It should be now have, or I'm not too sure. The Omnisportance Atlas notable passive now causes ritual favors in your maps to have 100% increased chance to be omens, previously from 50%. Ooh, I like that. I wonder if that means you're always guaranteed to have 2 omens then. The Rising Pyre Atlas notable passive now has breaches in your maps have 25% increased monster density, previously 40%. General improvements. In order to work around a common crash that was occurring on NVIDIA hardware with recent drivers, ooh, they finally fixing it, the game can now recover from a device removed event. When this occurs, the game will display a loading screen and pause while it attempts to recover. This only applies for the specific type of client crash and not all client crashes. So at least this means people won't have to be hard restarting their computers due to these crazy hard crashes. The reforging benches and towns have been repositioned to be more optimally located. The stash and guild stashes have also been slightly spaced apart to reduce misclicking. Strong boxes can now appear in certain Act 1 areas. Added a stash to the treasure room in the Trials of Chaos. Okay, is it... Oh, yeah, the very end area. That sounds fantastic, so you don't have to go to town and potentially lose the area. Many fire skills now visually burn grass in areas. That's cool. Improve the performance of summoning and reviving minions. Further improve safety checks, preventing using movement skills to skip the elevators and the Trial of Chaos encounters and prevent the encounter from functioning correctly. That's funny. The jumps performed when using the escape shot and toxic growth now allow you to jump over enemies and small amounts of terrain. Vaulting impact will also receive this change at a later date. That's good. I was just using escape shot the other day and it felt really bad. So that is needed. The decay debuff from decaying hex support now uses more appropriate visual effects and displays below the enemy's life bar. Grenade skills now have a small amount of random variation in travel distance when firing multiple grenades at once. Firebolt now uses the same animation as freezing shards instead of generic projectile spell animations. Updated the 3D art of the stash and guild stash. I'm curious to see what that looks like. Player changes. Characters are now required to be at least level 25 to enter Cruel difficulty areas, and level 50 to enter Endgame areas. I'm guessing this was done to prevent people from instantly getting full Ascendancy points after being speed ran through areas. The player's base attack speed while unarmed now is 1.4 attacks per second, previously 1.2. That is great. Killing Palm, Shattering Palm, Staggering Palm, and Hand of Triula now have 25% less attack speed to compensate for this change, previously 10%. Strange. I don't know why they did that. Just make it faster. Freeze builds up roughly 48% slower on enemies. That could be big. I'm not too sure how much that'll affect, but that could be really big for early game monks. In a bad way, obviously. Player base ailment threshold is now half of maximum life, previously all of maximum life. Oh, I hate that. Freeze threshold is still impossible, but oof. Presence base radius is now 4 meters, previously 6. Okay, so you have to be closer to do the presence mods. Monster modifiers stolen from rare monsters, such as through behead support, have had the effect they provide to players adjusted to be more appropriate. I hope this means it lasts longer, because currently it's very, very slow and very short. The Cruel version of Candlemass's Essence now provides 5% increased life, previously from 8%. Weird. The Worn Sandals Trial of Secumus Affliction now grants 30% less movement speed if you've been hit by an enemy recently. Previously 25% reduced movement speed flat. That's a good change. Blocking a hit by raising your shield or parrying now gives you a chance to avoid accumulating heavy stun buildup equal to the chance you would otherwise have had to evade the hit. Oh. So your evasion will work into stun resist as long as you're blocking or parrying. That's cool. That's really cool. Unified stun mechanics and terminology between players and monsters. The stagger that players suffer when blocking too much damage with their shield raise is now a heavy stun. Players are still unable to be heavy stunned unless a mechanic specifically states otherwise. Players can no longer be light stunned while their shield is raised. Modifiers to curse effects have been changed to instead applied to curse magnitude. Okay. This means that they are multiplicative with any other modifiers to the effect of the debuff on the target. For example, curse magnitude and slow magnitude are now multiplicative with each other for temporal chains. Player-created objects such as ice crystals no longer have a monster power value. I'm not too sure. Oh, monster power value, so you don't get charges for hitting them with meta, or getting meta skill charges for hitting them. Ice crystals can no longer apply on-kill effects such as Herald of Ash and Trample Toes Overkill, which is much needed, and I'm glad they got rid of that. That was way too powerful. Players have 50% more light stun threshold per time stunned in the past 4 seconds. Previously, 25% more player light stun threshold per time stunned in the last 6. I hope this means it'll stop you from getting chain stunned all the time, because that was bad. Your heavy stun bar now doesn't start emptying until the heavy stun animation has finished, instead of when the heavy stun animation starts. Heavy stun duration on the player is now 3 seconds, previously 1 second. I'm curious about the duration. Does that mean if you get up, immediately block, are you heavy stunned again? Players cannot block or evade hits while they are heavy stunned. Critical weakness stacks now track duration individually rather than refreshing the duration of all stacks when a new stack is gained. Pinned targets can no longer evade. Pinning a target now also causes them to be light stunned. Ooh, that's a huge buff. That is a huge buff. The base duration of Endurance, Frenzy, and Power Charges is now 15 seconds, previously 20. Fully broken armor now causes enemies to take 20% increased physical damage from hits. Revivable minions now spawn with their skills on cooldown. This only applies to newly summoned minions, not minions that have just revived. An ancestrally boosted slam now has 30% more damage and 20% more area of effect. Previously, 20% from both. That is another big boost, surprising boost. Persistent minions granted by Ascendancy passive skills will now automatically be summoned when you allocate the passives for the first time. Oh, that's cool. So that would be the Infernalist. I'm not too sure what... Oh, I guess also the new Kitava Smith would get his weapon right away. I see what that means. Okay. Players and monsters now only count as moving while moving, rather than for the whole length of as many animations that have some movement during some part of them. Setting a stat to a specific value, such as Chaos Inoculation setting your life to 1, or Blood Magic setting your mana to 0, now occurs before the conversion is applied to that stat, rather than being ignored by conversion. Now occurs before the conversion is applied to that stat. So that means you can't stack it, and then I'm not too sure how that affects it. I assume that means setting life to 1 means if you have any increased life mods, it won't apply to your pool, and it's only your base. Therefore, it would essentially bring down your stun threshold by a lot, and your ailment threshold, but I'm not too sure what the mana conversion would do. Now, Ascendancy Changes. This one I'm really looking forward to. I think it's going to be huge. Titan. The surprising strength Ascendancy notable passive now provides 50% more damage against heavy stun enemies, previously 40%. The Earthbreaker Ascendancy notable passive now provides 25% chance for slam skills you use yourself to cause aftershocks, previously 20%. Warbringer. The Warcaller's Bellow Ascendancy passive skill now causes war cries to explode corpses, dealing 25% of their life as physical damage, instead of providing corpses in your presence explode when you war cry, dealing 25% of their life as physical damage. This allows for war cry area of effects to scale the corpse explosion radius. Okay. I wonder if that means you no longer need to war cry to make them explode, but it's just around you if you have a persistent buff. I'm not too sure. That one I'd have to read a little bit more, but we'll do that later. The Turtle Charm Ascendancy passive skill now has 25% less block chance, previously 35%. The Encase and Jade skill has been reworked, and now consumes all stacks of Jade to grant guard based off your maximum life for each Jade stack consumed. The Ancestral Spirit skill granted by the Answered Call Ascendancy passive skill now has minions from this skill have 1% increased accuracy rating per 3 of your dexterity. Okay. That's pretty cool. And minions from this skill have 1% increased damage per 3 of your strength. The minions granted by the skill have had the following changes. Ancestral Jade Caster's pinning skill had its cooldown lowered to 10 seconds from 15. Ancestral Jade Hulk now has damage of 300% more stun buildup, previously from 200. The War Caller's Bellow buff from the Ancestral Warhorn now grants 10 rage on hit, previously 5. And 20% increased skill speed, previously 10. And the POE Shell aura from the Ancestral Spirit Turtle now grants nearby allies 80% increased defenses, previously 50, and 40% increased block chance, previously 25. So Warbringer was heavily buffed with the Ancestral Spirits. That's impressive and interesting. Gemling Legionnaire. The enhanced effectiveness of Ascendancy passive skills now also grants 20% less attributes. That's a huge nerf. I'm surprised they did that. The integrated efficiency Ascendancy passive skill has swapped positions with the gem studded. It no longer provides plus 3 skill slots. Instead, now causes skills to gain 20% increased damage per socketed red support gem. Skills gain 6% increased skill speed per socketed support gem and 20% increased critical hit chance per socketed blue support gem. I thought that was already a thing, but I'm not too familiar with gemlings. The implanted gem's Ascendancy passive skill no longer provide plus 1 level of all skills. Instead, it now provides a choice between plus 2 to level of all skills with a strength requirement, plus 2 all skills with a dex requirement, plus 2 to all skills with int requirement. That is, wow, that's good. Witch Hunter. No Mercy Ascendancy passive skill now causes you to deal up to 40% more damage to enemies based on their missing concentration, previously 30%. The Obsessive Ritual Ascendancy passive skill now provides 35% less armor and evasion rating, previously 50%. The Sorcery Ward Barrier recharge delay has also been reduced by 2 seconds at all gem levels. Now for the Deadeye, the Thrilling Chase Ascendancy passive skill now provides when you consume Frenzy charges, you count as having consumed twice as many, previously a 50% chance, and described in a slightly different way. The Pathfinder. The Running Assault passive skill now grants 50% less movement speed penalty from using skills while moving, previously from 30%. The location of this passive skill has been swapped with Relentless Pursuit. The Connected Chemistry Ascendancy passive skill has been removed. Enduring Elixirs no longer has a prerequisite. Added a new multi-choice Practical Remedies Ascendancy passive skill that provides the ability to allocate Grounding Stick, Dowsing Vial, or Thawing Campfire, which provides immunity to shock, ignite, and freeze, respectively. Beautiful. Added a new Sustainable Practices Ascendancy passive skill, which provides 30% of evasion rating, also grants elemental damage reduction, requires Practical Remedies. So this one here is basically just a charm. Acolyte of Chayula. The Embrace the Darkness Ascendancy passive skill now provides plus 8 to maximum darkness per level, previously plus 5. That was needed desperately. That was way too weak. The Ravenous Doubts Ascendancy passive skill no longer provides Mana Leech's instant. Instead, it now provides Mana Leech recovers based on other damage types as well as physical. Okay, I hope it also gives some base Mana Leech by itself. Honor lost during the Trials Alchemist is now taken before darkness. Good. Invoker, and Protect Me from Harm Ascendancy passive skill now provides 50% less evasion rating, previously 40%. And Lead Me Through Grace Ascendancy passive skill now provides 1 spirit for every 8 energy shield on equipped body armor from 6. And 1 spirit for every 20 evasion on the body armor, previously 15. So that's a huge nerf as well. The Elemental Expression skill, granted by the And Scatter Them to the Winds passive tree, now deals 40% more damage at all gem levels. But they didn't make it an attack skill. I really hope they made it an attack skill. If they did, that changes it, because it doesn't matter about the 40% more damage. It was doing hundreds of damage before. It just needs to be an attack skill, not spell. Blood Mage. The Blood Barb's Ascendancy passive skill no longer provides 10% of damage gained as extra physical damage. It now causes bleeding you inflict on cursed targets to be activated. That's cool. So they're really focusing on the bleeding mechanic and blood type skills this league, it seems. Added a new Between the Cracks Ascendancy passive skill that causes critical hits to ignore monster armor. Requires Sanguimancy. That is really strong too. Interesting. They're adding a lot of ways to ignore elemental resistance, and now they're also adding ways to ignore armor. Infernalist. The Demon Form skill granted by the Demonic Possession Ascendancy passive skill now has a cooldown of 15 seconds, previously 20, and a maximum Demon Flame of 10, previously uncapped. Now, you lose a flat amount of life per second per Demon Flame, scaling with skill level, rather than a percentage of your maximum life. The dodge roll while in Demon Form has also had its distance reduced. The Seething Body Ascendancy passive skill now has, while on high Infernal Flame, you and your allies in your presence gain 50% of damage as fire damage, previously 20%. Big. The Grinning Immolation Ascendancy passive skill now provides 50% more critical damage bonus, previously from 30. The Pyromantic Pact Ascendancy passive skill now causes 50% of the Infernal Flame to be lost per second if none was gained in the past 2 seconds, previously 10%. So you just lose it basically instantly if you're not attacking within 2 seconds. The Bringer of Flame Ascendancy passive skill now causes all damage from you and allies in your presence to contribute to ignite chance and magnitude, instead of providing, while not on low Infernal Flame, all damage from you and allies in your presence contributes to ignite chance and magnitude. No longer requires Pyromantic Pact. The Loyal Hellhound Ascendancy passive skill no longer causes 20% of damage from hits to be taken from your Hellhound's life before you. That's a huge nerf. The Master Darkness Ascendancy passive skill now grants Demon Flame has no maximum. Okay, so they got rid of the previously uncapped and made it a new Ascendancy passive. The Small Mana Ascendancy passive skills now provide 3% increased maximum mana from 4%. After allocating the Pyromantic Pact Ascendancy passive skill, you will now have at least one maximum Infernal Flame, even with 100% reduced maximum mana. Using Blink while in Demon Form now plays an appropriate animation instead of landing to blink. Interesting. Chronomancer. The Circular Heartbeat Ascendancy passive has been removed. Rapid River no longer has a prerequisite. A Quicksand Hourglass Ascendancy passive skill now grants every 10 seconds, gain 50% more cast speed for 5 seconds. Previously, every 12 seconds you gain it for 4 seconds. Added a new Flood of Echoes Ascendancy passive skill that grants the Unleash skill. And the Stormweaver. The Force of Will Ascendancy passive skill now provides 1% increased effective Arcane Surge on you per 25 maximum mana, previously 15% or 15 mana. The Scouring Winds Ascendancy passive now causes exposure you inflict to lower the effective resistance by an additional 12%, previously 20%. The Strike Twice Ascendancy notable passive no longer provides 50% less shock duration. Instead, it now provides 25% less magnitude of shock you inflict. And the Small Mana Ascendancy passive skills no longer provide 4% increased maximum mana and now provide 12% increased mana regenerate. So they really gutted the Stormweaver from shock magnitude and stacking mana. That is very surprising how much they nerfed it. I knew they were going to, but I didn't expect by that much. Now the passive skill tree changes. There is a lot on here that there is no way I'd be able to get through with actually understanding. This we'll just have to see it in game, but I'm going to scroll it down in sections so that we can see. If you want to read them yourself, you can pause the video. This is top to bottom all the skill tree changes, or the passive tree changes. Right, now skill changes. Many skills have had their base damage and or damage growth per level rebalanced. Most of these changes are not specifically mentioned as the changes are too widespread. The mana cost for all attacks, marks, and war cries have been reduced, most notably at higher gem levels. They said in an interview before it went from 9%. It was previously at 12% level. It raised for mana cost. Now it's 9% increased mana cost per level. Adjusted minion damage and life scaling. General damage and life is the same early game, but lower than before at higher levels. Adjusted the target life threshold for Skeletal Arcanist explosive demise skill according with the life scaling changes. Adjusted Skeletal Cleric's heal life scaling accordingly. Arc no longer deals more damage for each remaining chain, and chains 6 to 8 times at gem levels 5 to 20, previously 2 to 5. Quality now provides 0 to 2% more damage for each remaining chain, previously 0 to 5%. So it hits a lot more enemies, but deals less damage. So it's a better clear skill, it seems. Archmage now causes non-channeling skills to gain 3% damage as extra lightning damage per 100 max mana. You have at all gem levels. Previously 5 to 6% at gem levels 14 to 20. Non-channeling spells now cost an additional 6.7 to 6.1% of your maximum mana at gem levels 14 to 20, previously 5.3 to 5.05. Quality now provides 0 to 10% reduced reservation. Instead of granting non-channeling spells, have 0 to 2% damage as extra lightning damage per 100 max mana you have. Okay, I didn't even realize it did that. Armor Breaker has had the armor break amount lowered by roughly 20% at all gem levels. Very good. Artillery Ballista base physical damage scaling now matches that of the other totems like Shockwave Totem, Ripwire Ballista. The Artillery Explosion now converts 100% of physical damage to fire damage, previously 90%. Quality now provides 0 to 0.4 seconds reduced to totem base attack time, previously increased attack speed. Ancestral Warrior Totem now explicitly states that it wields a two-handed mace to clarify that it benefits from your mace-related stats. Quality is at plus 0 to 2 seconds to totem duration. Previously, it was 0.4 seconds. Banner skills have had an aura radius of 4.5 meters, previously 4, and are now correctly considered aura skills. Barrage Repeats now deal 50% less damage at all gem levels, previously 23 to 15% at 50 to 20. 560 to 410% of repeated attack skill time is now added to the skill's cooldown to a maximum of 30 seconds. Previously it was 1400 to 1200. Quality now causes repeats to deal 0 to 5% more damage, and it was previously 0 to 15% more. Barrier Invocation now only builds energy from enemy hits to energy shield, rather than all hits energy shield. Barrier Invocation now gains 1 energy for each 10 energy shield lost to damage taken, previously 5 energy. Bleeding Concoction now has 200% more magnitude of bleeding inflicted, previously 100%. Blink is now a travel skill. Bone Blast now has a 40% chance to inflict bleeding on hit, previously 20% chance. Bone Storm's Shrapnel has become a greater mechanic called Impale. Ooh, they brought Impale in, that's fantastic. Similar to the Impale mechanic from Path of Exile 1. Hits that impale an enemy cause the next attack hit against that enemy to gain added physical damage equal to 30% of the physical damage dealt by the impaling hit. Bone Storm now impales on hit instead of applying a specialized debuff and has 200% more magnitude of impale. Cast on Minion Death now only gains energy when persistent minions are killed. Additionally, minions that are created by a very under-leveled minion skill relative to the current area level now grant less energy when killed. Level 20 plus minion skills will occur no penalty in endgame content. Cast on Shock now gains 1 energy per power of enemy you shock with hits from skills, and it was previously 2. Cluster Grenade, mini grenade explosion, has a radius of 1.4 meters now, previously 1.2. Combat Frenzy now has gain of frenzy charge when you freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy no more than once every 5.3 to 4.1 seconds. So they tripled the cooldown on it, essentially, or did 2.5 times the cooldown. That's unfortunate. Concoction skills now require an unarmed weapon set. They no longer deal your base unarmed damage, instead dealing only attack damage specified from the skill, like marks. They now consume 5 mana flask charges per use, previously 3. Conduction now causes cursed enemies to have minus 25% reduced lightning resistance at gem level 7, previously 32%, scaling up to 29% at 20 when it was previously 36%. Cold Snap now has an explosion radius of 1.6 meters, previously 0.7. Curse skills now apply the curses after 1.5 seconds delay instead of 1 second. Dark Effigy projectiles now have critical hit chance of 7%, previously 11%, and an impact radius of 1.2 meters, previously 0.8. Quality is now 20% chance to inflict withered for 2 seconds on hit, previously 50%. Decompose, the skill granted by Corpse Wade unique boots, now causes the poison cloud to poison enemies as though dealing chaos damage equal up to 10 to 19.5% of Corpse's maximum life at gem levels 1 to 20. So they... And it was previously 30 to 39.5, so they really gutted Corpse Wade boots. Despair now causes cursed enemies to have minus 20% chaos resistance at level 9 from 32%, scaling up to 24% at level 20 from 36%. Detonate Dead now deals physical damage equal to 8.8 to 10.7 of Corpse's maximum life at gem level 7 to 20, previously 20% at all gem levels, scaling further past gem level 20. It also now deals 41 to 61 fire damage at level 7, previously 28 to 43, scaling up to 139 to 208 fire damage at gem level 20, previously 169 to 254. So they really nerfed the scaling in all ways for Detonate Dead. Detonating Arrows explosion radius is now 2.4 meters from 1.8. Direct Minions now has a half-second cooldown. Elemental Invocation now grants 10 energy per power of enemies you freeze with hits from skills, which was previously 10, so they didn't change that. 2 energy per power of enemies you ignite with hits from skills, modified by the percentage of the enemy's ailment threshold the ignite will deal. It was previously 3. And gains 1 energy per power of enemies you shock with hits from skills, previously 3. So freezing is still the same, but freezing is half as likely to happen. Ignite, I believe, is the same, but shock is down to a third. Ignite went from 2 to 3, so it's down by half, essentially. The escape shot now scales freeze build up with gem level up to 585% more at gem level 20, previously 300% at all levels. Quality is now 120% more freeze build up from 80%. Explosive Concoction now has 200% more magnitude of ignite inflicted, previously 100%. Explosive Grenade cooldown is now 7 seconds, previously 3 seconds. Now has an explosive radius of 2 to 2.4 meters at gem levels 1 to 20, previously 1.8 to 2.4. It now has a detonation time of 3 seconds, previously 2.5. Explosive Grenades, grenades did not need longer explosion times. Eye of Winter now gains 75% of damage as damage of the corresponding type when passing over elemental ground effects, previously 50%. The skill no longer incorrectly states that the projectiles applies the passed over ground effect to nearby enemies. I'm surprised they didn't change anything to do with critical weakness. Falling Thunder projectiles now have 50% more damage per power charge consumed, previously 25%. Huge boost to Falling Thunder, and that thing was already great. Fireball no longer bypasses the Raging Spirit limit. The secondary fireball projectiles no longer affected by additional projectiles. This was mostly to prevent performance issues when used with Wild Shard support. Firebolt now has a maximum downward tilt angle against closer targets, making it harder to hit enemies with multiple explosions. Firestorm's improved bolts now have critical hit chance of 7%, previously 14. Flame Blast now has 15 seconds of cooldown, previously none. and now has 75% more damage per stage, previously 200%. It now has an explosion radius of 0.6 meters per stage, previously 0.4, and quality now provides 0 to 20% cast speed, previously 10%. Flame Wall now causes projectiles which pass through the wall to deal 33 to 48 at a gem level or damage at gem level 20, previously 64 to 91, while the gem level 1 values are unchanged. More significant reductions have been made past gem level 20. Flammability now causes cursed enemies to have minus 25% fire res at gem level 7, previously minus 32%, scaling up to minus 29%, previously 36%. Flash grenades now has 50% more stun buildup from 400%. Fragmentation rounds base explosive radius is now 1.8 meters at all gem levels from 1.4 to 1.6. Freezing charge now fires 5 projectiles, previously 7, and is 100% more freeze buildup instead of 50. Freezing salvo now scales freeze buildup with gem level up to 107% more at level 20 instead of 50% at all levels. Frost Bomb has pulse and explosion radius 2 to 2.7 meters at gem levels 1 to 20 instead of 1.7 to 2.4. Frostball now has a cooldown of 5 seconds instead of 3. Frozen Locust Explosion now deals 6 to 9 base damage of quarterstaff. Now deals 6 to 9 base quarterstaff cold damage at level 1, unchanged. Now scaling up to 141 to 212 damage at level 20, and is previously about half that. The damage past level 20 has also been adjusted. Explosion radius is now 2.4 meters instead of 2. Fulminating Concoction now has 200% more chance to shock instead of 100. Galvanic Shards now converts 60% of physical damage to lightning instead of 40. Gas Arrows, Gas Grenades, and Decompose now have a limit of 6 clouds. Glacial Bolt Walls now last 8 seconds instead of 6. Glacial Cascade quality now gains 10% physical damage as cold instead of 10% increased attack speed. Grim Feast can no longer be engraved in the gem cutting menu. Existing Grim Feast gems have been disabled. We aim to rework Grim Feast in the coming future. They just completely removed Grim Feast. Holy crap. Hammer of the Gods no longer has a cooldown, but now requires 20 glory to use. Glory is a resource that gets built up by heavy stunning enemies. The amount of glory gained is based on the stun monster's power. Quality is 0 to 0.4 to impact radius, previously 1% increased cooldown rate. So you can't use that as an opening skill, so you no longer get it for like damage to enemies on full life. Hand to Chayula now specifies that it triggers socketed marks. This is purely a description change. Okay. Hopefully that means you can use it with other weapon types as well and just put them away because it's an unarmed skill. I'd like to put away a bow or a spear or whatever and use Hand to Chayula. I really hope that works, but I doubt it does. Herald skills with attacks now properly state their hits cannot be evaded. This is not a functional change, just a descriptive one. Excuse me. Herald of Ash's exploding radius is now 1.2 from 1 meter. Herald of Ash's quality now provides an additional 0.5% of overkill damage contributes to base ignite damage instead of the previous ignite surrounding enemies if overkill damage is at least percentage of enemies' max life benefit that was actively detrimental. Yeah, that's funny. Herald of Ice's explosion radius is now 1.6 meters instead of 1.8. Herald of Plague now requires a martial weapon, making it consistent with the weapon restrictions of other Herald skills. Herald of Thunder's Bolt impact radius is now 1.4 meters from 1.6. I didn't know it was that close to Herald of Ice's size. That's crazy. Hex Blast can now only detonate curses for which at least 50% of the duration has expired. What? Why would they do that? This means it can never explode curses that have an infinite duration. So they're trying to get rid of the Blasphemy Hex Blast? That doesn't make any sense. Curse orbs will be visually different when 50% of the curse duration is expired if you have Hex Blast equipped. The explosion radius of Hex Blast has been increased to 2 meters, previously 1.6, and now has a maximum of 3 explosions per cast instead of 9. I'm very surprised by that heavy Hex Blast nerf when it was already not in a good place. Hex Blast damage has been lowered by roughly 17% at all gem levels. The explosion radius has also been reduced to 1.2 meters, previously 1.6. This completely changes the idea I had for making a Lich character. I don't think Hex Blast would be even worth it if you couldn't do Blasphemy Hex Blast anymore. It would have to be a minion or mana stacking type. Yeah, I was really looking forward to the Hex Blast. Anyways, Hypothermia has the same reduction of 25% at gem level 7 and 29 at 20, reduced by about 7% at each level. Ice crystals created by Glacial Bolt and Frostwall now have lowered life scaling past gem level 20. Their scaling up until this point is unchanged. Ice Shard's explosion radius is now 1.4 meters from 1.2, has a maximum of 16 active shards from 12, and has 16 bolts loaded per clip, previously 12. Shards have existed for at least half a second, previously 1 second, now deal 700% more damage instead of 900. If you have multiple travel skills with cooldowns, our cooldowns are now shared. Oh, I don't like that either. That's the same as 1, but I think they're doing that to stop blink spam. Improve Ball Lightning's description to clarify the ball itself does not hit enemies. Improve Skeletal Cleric's behavior to reduce cases where they would run at enemies and attempt to attack them. Incinerate now has 25% less ignite duration instead of 50%. Leap Slam now has 62 to 88% more stun buildup at gem levels 7 to 20 instead of 26 to 39. Lightning Conduit now performs a number of extra lightning bolts if it consumes shock from an enemy. These bolts are distributed among targets in the skills area, but can hit the same target multiple times if few enough targets were hit. Lightning Bolt has 200% more chance of shock instead of 100%. Lightning Conduit has 20% more damage with hits per 5% shock effect on enemies instead of 100% more damage. So it scales harder if you have crazy shock effect. Lightning Arrow now displays, or Lightning Rod Arrow now disappears after being chained to 6 times at all gem levels instead of 8 to 14 times 1 to 20. Arrows now take 1 second to charge up before releasing a lightning burst when chained to. Lightning arrows that chain to lightning rod arrows cause the pulse to happen instantly instead of needing to charge up. Lightning warp no longer creates shock drown if targeting a ball lightning projectile. Magna Spray from the Magna Barrier skill now deals 6 to 10 to 151 to 226 base fire damage at levels 1 to 20 instead of 4 to 7 and 234 to 351. So better at early levels, way worse at later levels. It now has 6 to 8 added fire damage per 15 armor on shield at all levels instead of 2 to 4, so the scaling is better. It now has damage effectiveness of 130% to 405% instead of 120 to 490. The Magnetic Salvo now deals 100 to 140% of attack damage with impact at gem levels 13 to 20 instead of 89 to 125, and 155 to 218% of attack damage with explosion at gem levels 13 to 20 from 177 to 250. So the bolt, or the impact, does more damage, the explosion does less. It now fires up to 8 missiles at all gem levels instead of 14 to 17 at levels 13 to 20, and now provides plus 4 missiles for max quality instead of 20% more projectile speed, so you can have 12 projectiles total instead of 14 to 17. That is a large projectile nerf. Mana Tempest quality now grants additional damage gained as lightning instead of causing its effects to linger after you exited the Tempest, which did not actually function. Mantra of Destruction's Purple Flames of Chayula now has a duration of 8 seconds, previously 6. Malice now applies critical weakness every 0.52 seconds at level 19 instead of 0.64. Molten Blast now has, while dual wielding, fires twice as many projectiles with 15% less attack speed, previously 30%. Pain Offering's aura now grants minions 28 to 58% increased damage at level... Okay. Perfect Strike no longer always ignites and now has an attack speed of 35% base instead of 45%. Quality now provides 0 to 20% more ignite chance, previously 0 to 20% magnitude of ignite you inflict. Perfect Strike now also deals damage in a wider area close to the player. making it less likely to miss enemies standing next to the player. Permafrost bolts now scale freeze buildup with gem level up to 186% more damage at level 20. Plague Bearer now stores up to 197 to 15,257 points in damage at level 20. Previously about, actually really similar, 158 to 14,989. The damage past level 20 has also been reduced. That's a weird change. It's super minor. Poisonous Concoction now has 200% more magnitude of poisons inflicted, previously 100%. Now deals base physical damage instead of chaos damage. Okay. Profane Ritual now has a ritual radius of 0.2 meters instead of 1.8. Raging Spirits now has spirit duration of 5 seconds, previously 4, and a maximum 2 spirits summoned per spell cast instead of 5. The description of Raging Spirits has also been updated to make more clear the triggered spells will not summon spirits. Okay, so you can't use Raging Spirits with a trigger anymore to have infinite Raging Spirits. That's interesting. Improve the performance of spawning very high amounts of Raging Spirits. If you spawn a larger number of spirits at the same time, the spawning of them is now spread out over a short duration. Rain of Arrows landing frequency is now affected by the projectile speed modifiers, meaning that, for example, increased projectile speed causes the same number of arrows to land in a shorter total time. Reaper's Invocation now grants 15 energy per power of enemies you kill with melee attacks instead of 10. Ripwire Ballista Bolts now pins enemies as though dealing 400% more damage instead of 250%. Rolling Slam now has plus 1 second to total attack time, previously 1.5 seconds, and the mana cost has been adjusted accordingly. Sacrifice now has minions revive 66% more slowly instead of 37%, scaling to 60% more slowly at level 20 from 31%. Seismic Cry no longer has increased Warcry speed. Shard Scavenger now instantly reloads your crossbow upon consuming Freeze, Shock, and Night, or fully broken armor no more than once every 7.3 to 6.1 seconds at gem levels 8 to 20 instead of the 9.3 to 8.2 seconds it was before. Shattering Concoction now has 200% more freeze buildup instead of 100. Shattering Palm explosions now have an additional random delay. The shards of ice now cannot be applied to targets if the Shattering Palm damage strike broke an existing ice shard on them. Okay. Shield Wall segment life past gem level 20 now matches that of the ice crystals. From Frostwall, for example, this is a reduction in total life. Explosion radius is now 4 meters instead of 3. Shock Chain Arrows now chain up to 8 meters away from 4. Siphoning Strike Shockwave radius is now 2 meters instead of 1.8. Skeletal Arsonist Explosive Demise skill deals additional fire damage equal to 12% of minions' maximum life, previously 15%, and now has 2.4 meters explosive radius instead of 2 meters. Skeletal Brute quality now causes brutes to inflict more stun buildup instead of having increased maximum life. Okay. They really don't like detonate dead with minions. Skeletal Frost Mage's Ice Bomb now has 8-second cooldown, previously 6. Skeletal Reavers now correctly gain rage on hit with their command skill and rage skill is active. Skeletal Storm Mage chain count now scales with minions gem levels up to 4 chains at level 20 instead of 2 at all levels. Skeletal Warriors can no longer be engraved in the gem cunning menu. That's funny. They thought it was a glitch in the last interview, but now they're saying it was only provided as a stopgap until this functionality was implemented. Existing copies of Skeletal Warrior have been turned into Skeletal Sniper gems. The Skeletal Warrior skill granted by some scepters now allows you to summon additional skeletons by reserving spirit in addition to the 2 free skeletons it grants normally. 2 free skeletons? They weren't free before. I don't believe so. I do not believe they were free. I'm trying to remember, but it's been a while since I've done that tech. Snipe's attack speed multiplier and mana cost has been adjusted so that the attack time matches the time until a perfect strike. This is mainly to improve description, and the function of the skill is unchanged. Okay. Storm Wave now has 100% more chance to shock. Soul Offering now grants 56 to 77% increased spell damage at levels 13 to 20, rather than 32 to 39% more spell damage. That's okay, increased spell damage instead of more spell damage. Spark now fires 4 to 9 projectiles at levels 1 to 20 instead of 6 to 14, and no longer has 0 to 19% increased projectile speed for the quality. Quality now has 0 to 30% increased projectile speed. Oh, and no longer has the projectile speed, but quality now provides the projectile speed and no longer gives extra projectiles. Spiral Volley now has 30% more damage per frenzy charge consumed instead of 20. Sunder now has plus 1 second to total attack time instead of 1.4, and the mana cost has been adjusted accordingly. Stampede quality now provides 0 to 20% chance to cause aftershocks instead of 30%. Stormblast bolts no longer have 30% less reload speed. Stormcaller's arrows bolt now has 50% more chance to shock instead of 800%. Tempest Bell Shockwave no longer deals 30% more damage per elemental ailment afflicting the bell, or 60% of physical damage converted to the corresponding damage type of each ailment afflicting the bell. Instead, it now gains 30% of physical damage as extra damage of each type matching an elemental ailment on the bell, and now also deals 60 to 132% of attack damage at gem levels 33 to 20 instead of 96 to 211. So Tempest Bell is now a physical skill that gets extra damage for ailments. Okay, that's weird. Tempest Bell can no longer trigger a shockwave every 250 milliseconds. This value is a strict limit, not a cooldown. As such, it cannot be modified by cooldown recovery modifiers. Tempest Bell's limit on number of bells placed is now shared between different copies of the skill. The on-kill effect of Herald skills can no longer trigger from kills caused by other Heralds. We knew that was coming. Tornado Shot's splitting effect now also applies to thrown spears. Oh, that could be fun. I wonder if that works with any of the tornado or any of those skills in the spear tab. Toxic Growth now requires more stored poison to reach maximum radius and damage, and more stored poisons to expire faster. Pustule's duration time is now 15 seconds, previously 6. Stored poison now adds up 1.5 meters to base explosion radius, previously plus 1. Now fires 6 arrows instead of 8, and quality now provides fire of 0 to 2 arrows and 0 to 2 pustules, previously 0 to 3 projectiles, now has a limit of 6 pustules. Unearth's Bone Construct duration is now 15 seconds instead of 12, and quality now provides an extra 5 seconds the construct duration instead of 4. Vaulting Impact now has 54 to 88% more stun buildup at levels 3 to 20 instead of 30% at all levels. Vine Arrow now has a limit of 1 plant, but can be increased to 2 with overabundance. The Vine now has a plant duration of 8 seconds instead of 6. Volcanic Fissure now has a limit of 8 concurrent fissures on the ground, and the aftershocks no longer erupt other fissures. Volcanic Fissures now has a limit of 8 concurrent fissures on the ground, and the aftershocks no longer erupt other fissures. Voltaic Grenade cooldown is now 6 seconds, previously 3, and now has explosion radius of 2 to 2.4 meters at gem levels 1 to 20, previously 1.8 to 2.4. Now has a detonation time of 2.5 seconds instead of 1.2. Wave of Frost now has 390 to 585% more freeze buildup at levels 7 to 20 instead of 275% at all levels. Wind Dancer now grants 10% more evasion per stage at all gem levels, previously 15 to 19% at levels 4 to 20, and gains a stage every 1.4 to 1.12 seconds at gem levels 4 to 20, previously 1.5 to 1.3. Gale Force now deals 53 to 163% of attack damage at levels 4 to 20 instead of 40 to 125%, and now uses the critical hit chance of your main hand weapon instead of having a baseline 5% critical hit chance. Wind Dancer stage is now consumed on being hit by an enemy instead of from a melee attack. Wind Dancer stage gain timer is no longer interrupted when you are hit. Quality now provides extra explosion radius instead of extra maximum stages. So it does more damage, gives less evasion, and is more of a nuke everything around you skill instead of a defensive skill while still being defensive. Honestly, I'm not too sure how I feel about that. It could be good, could be bad. I'm not too sure. Withering Presence, wither duration is 6 seconds instead of 4, and now withers enemies in your presence every 1.7 to 1.4 seconds instead of 2.7 to 1.6. Skills with expanding ground effects were unintentionally scaling radius over time instead of area of effect. This still scales the radius, though we have updated the description and lowered the values of many of the effective skills. Poison Cloud, Gas Arrow, Gas Grenade, and Decompose now gain 20% more radius per second, up to a maximum of 80%. Poison Cloud, Skeletal... Okay. Poison Cloud, Skeletal Snipers now gain 20% more radius per second, up to a maximum of 80% from 40% to a maximum of 200. Chilled Ground from Frognus Locust now gains 30% more radius per second, up to a maximum of 150% from 40% to a maximum of 240. So that is a huge nerf from Chilled Ground on Frozen Locust. The Disciple and Purity auras granted from some scepters now apply to the player wielding the scepter as well as their allies. I did not know that didn't apply to the person wielding it. That is a massive buff and was most definitely needed. The spread of grenade skills with more than one projectile, such as when using the scattershot support, has been reduced by 40%. Except for cluster grenades. Releasing Raise Shield immediately after blocking a skill now performs a shield bash that damages and stuns enemies in front of you and also dazes them if you're using a tower shield. So that is the shield change they're wanting to do. Confirmed shield change is in the game. Added a new gem tag, Conditional. This type detonates a skill which cannot be used unless a given condition is met. Combo is one example of this. Modifiers adding or subtracting a value to the cost of a skill now apply before the cost multipliers from supports. Modifiers adding or subtracting a value to the total cost of a skill are unchanged. These still apply after all other modifiers. Let's see here. We're at support changes now. There is a lot to still go through. That is so much. Okay, we won't be able to get through all of this. We're going to start skipping through here a bit. And we'll definitely post this as a slow down bit so you can go through it. But support changes, Astral Projection now causes support skills to have 25% area of effect instead of 35. Brutality causes support skills to do 25% more physical damage instead of 35. Burning Inscription has 110 cost multiplier instead of 100. Cannibalism provides 2% of life recovered on kill, while support skill is active instead of 4%. Still a lot. Capacitor now has 130% cost multiplier from 100. Oof. Close Combat now has 120 cost multiplier instead of 140. Considered Casting now has 115% cost multiplier instead of 100. Controlled Destruction, Extraction supports now correctly are not socketable into skills which had secondary damaging hits but no spell damage hits. These supports were never scaling damage of the skills and were just incorrectly socketable. Crescendo now has 120% cost multiplier from 100, which is surprising. Culmination now causes support skills to deal 3% more damage per combo instead of 2%, and now loses combo if you generate no combo for 4 seconds instead of 3. Exploit Weakness now causes supported skills to consume enemy fully broken armor and deal 40% more damage instead of 50. That is weird that they nerfed it because it was already bad. Feeding Frenzy and Meat Shield can no longer support minions which are undamageable. Fist of War now has a cost multiplier of 150% instead of 140. Hourglass now causes support skills to deal 30% more damage instead of 40. That's also surprising. Impact Shockwave now causes support skills to cause an aftershock when they heavy stun an enemy, dealing the same damage to enemies within 1.8 meters instead of 2. Impetus has now 115% cost multiplier instead of 120. 115% instead of 120. Lockdown now has a cost multiplier of 100% instead of 120. Magnified Effect now has a cost of 130% instead of 120 and causes support skills to have 30% more area of effect instead of 40. Mana Flare now has a flare radius of 2 meters instead of 1.6 and now consumes 25% of current mana to deal that much fire damage, previously 20%. Meat Shield supports now grant minions from support skills take 35% less damage instead of granting them 50% more maximum life. Mobility support now has 25% less movement speed penalty while using support skills, previously 30%. Neural overload now has a cost multiplier of 100% instead of 120. Overcharge support now only increases the magnitude of shock from hits. Potential now causes support skills to have 40% more chance to critically hit when consuming power charges instead of 30. Scattershot support now has 35% less damage instead of 20. Shock Siphon can no longer be engraved in the gem cutting menus. Existing copies of this support gem will still function. That's surprising. That was a nice energy shield supporting gem. Spell Echo support can no longer support triggered skills. Spiral Volley now fires directly with the first arrow instead of the final arrow. Strip Away now causes exposure applied by support skills to have 20% increased effect instead of 30. Unbreakable has different stun threshold multiplier values for incoming light stuns as opposed to heavy stuns. Window of Opportunity now causes support skills to deal 35% more damage when released with perfect timing window instead of 50%, and have 35% shorter perfect timing window instead of 25%. They made Window of Opportunity worse when it was already terrible. Holy crap. And Withering Touch has a chance to apply Withered based on the amount of chaos damage dealt by the hit from always applying a single attack, and allows that chance to roll beyond 100% to potentially apply multiple stacks with larger hits. Alright. So this is becoming a lot. We are already over an hour and 15 minutes in. Let's just check out the few quick ones that are worth noting first. So Against the Darkness is a medium radius instead of large, and attribute modifiers now only go 2 to 3% instead of 2 to 4. Existing items could be made worse with a Divine Orb. Against the Darkness gives 1%, no longer gives 1% maximum life or mana. Instead, they can cause small radius passives to give +8 to maximum life or +8 to maximum mana. Acermentis is 0 to 50 all attribute, or 50 to 100 all attributes instead of 80 to 100. Considers Disdain, Choir the Storms. Once again triggers regular lightning bolt instead of greater lightning bolts. Dream Fragments, 10% maximum mana instead of 20. What are some other good ones in here? Hands of Wisdom in action. Unique Loves adds 1 to 10 lightning damage per 20 int instead of 10. Yeah, that's exactly what I figured would happen. And 1% increased attack speed per 20 dex instead of 3% per 25. Oh wow, Hands of Wisdom in action got really nerfed. The per attribute change will affect existing items, while a Divine Orb can be used to attain the remaining value changes. This unique is also now found as the Spiral Wraps base type instead of Furtive Wraps. This change does not affect existing items. Ingenuity Belt no longer does 40 to 80% increased bonuses gained from equipped rings. Now has 30 to 50% increased bonuses from left ring and 30 to 50% increased bonus from right ring. Existing versions of this item are unaffected by these changes. Oh my, so this does not actually work with the third ring from the Ritualist like they said it would in the whatever the interview there. That's very surprising. Melting Nailstrom, Unique Flask no longer has recover all mana when used. Moyer now generates 3 random modifiers instead of 2. Wow. But the modifiers can no longer rule 10% increased rarity, 5% max life, max mana. Can no longer roll 5% increase all attributes. And these modifiers have been added. 6 to 10 spirit per soul core instead of 10. 6 to 10% increased global defenses instead of 10. 5 to 7 to all elemental resistances per socketed rune instead of 10. Added 7 random socketed rune or soul core things. 50 spirit. Now provides 50. No longer provides plus 50 to spirit. That was the one thing that made it special. Pillar of the Cage God, Unique Quarterstaff now provides 1% increased attack speed per 10 dex and 1% area of effect per 10 int instead of 2% for each of them. It now also provides 10% increased weapon damage. per 10 strength instead of 5. The per attribute changes will affect existing items, while a divine orb can be used to obtain the remaining values. Queen of the Force unique body armor now grants 1% increased movement speed per 800 evasion rating, previously 500. Existing versions of this unique can be updated with a divine orb. This modifier also can no longer scale with modifier effects such as corruption. Temporalis unique body armor now causes skills to have -2 to -1 second cooldown instead of 4 to 2. Existing versions will not be divined. Venture's Gamble now grants -25 to 25% increased rarity instead of -40 to 40. Time loss jewel modifiers now grant notable passives, grant 5 to 10% instead of 10 to 20%. Surprising. Real big nerf to a whole bunch of jewels here, that's for sure. Okay, the name and text of the keystone from Heroic Tragedy Timeless Jewels now correctly match up with the relevant expedition leader. Keystones conquered by Alroth are now called Knightly Tenets. Keystones conquered by Menev are now called Circular Teachings. And keystones conquered by Verana are now called Black Scythe Training. So Medev is the one you want now. Okay, that's funny. Item changes, a whole bunch of items changed. I am going to just scroll through this quick now. I will post a short version of this video and a long version, but it is entirely too much reading for me right now. Here is me slowly scrolling through it, so that if you're wanting to read the last bit of it, like these microtransactions, actually kind of I want to read later, but I have some things I gotta do at home, so this is where I will leave off the video. I just need to quickly give you guys enough time so that you can pause and read everything. I should be holding like this. That's where it ended last time. Let's go here. And that is everything. Just missed the bat. The below features were showcased, but unfortunately were not able to be included in this patch. Ability to lock your main hand, offhand, or both so that you can use both items between weapon sets. I was really hoping for that one, but it's okay.